7 minutes ago, Pentagon finally breaks silence on recent UFO sightings. Do we really inhabit a solitary universe? Everyone has thought about this at some point in their lives. Is it still a fair question given that there are more than 100 million galaxies and counting? Many people now believe that we are not alone, as UFO sightings have started to become rather common. The news has continued to be filled with reports of strange planes and animals with human-like appearances, even if they are frequently promptly ignored. Many people think that the government may be concealing evidence of UFOs and/or evidence of the presence of alien entities due to the secrecy and speed at which this news is rapidly removed from circulation. Explore our top 10 UFO proofs the Pentagon is hiding from us in this video. The Westall incident takes the 10th spot. About 300 kids and several staff at a school in Melbourne saw several UFOs silently flying through the sky before landing on a nearby field during this encounter. Although there has been much discussion regarding this incident over the years, one eyewitness story sticks out. The report comes from a science instructor at the institution. Everything changed the instant he rushed outside to investigate the commotion after being informed about the UFO sightings by a frightened pupil. The science teacher, Andrew, was a skeptic who had read about UFO sightings. But he had a sudden change of heart when he saw what he called an object the size of a vehicle with a metal rod jutting up in the air. The headmaster had gone to great lengths to discourage anyone from discussing the incident, even threatening them with harsh consequences. The Mount Rainier event is listed at number 9. On June 24, 1947, Kenneth Arnold was traveling from Chehalis, Washington to Yakima, Washington when this incident took place. Kenneth was flying in a privately owned aircraft when he abruptly noticed a bright light flashing on one of his wings. For approximately 3 minutes, Kenneth had seen the line of flying saucer-shaped objects weave in and out of the mountain peaks. However, Kenneth's explanation was mocked, which made him bitter. 8th on the list is the Chicago UFO. The November 7, 2006 UFO sighting in Chicago took place. A United Airlines employee saw a dark gray metallic plane hovering above one of the gates at Chicago O'Hare International Airport. The Federal Aviation Administration just dismissed the incident as a weather phenomenon and declined to look into it. 7 is where we have the significant flap. There was a widespread panic about flying saucers in 1952. There were so many reports of unidentified flying objects making the rounds that a special intelligence unit of the Air Force had to be sent out to investigate what was happening in Washington's airspace. There had been a significant increase in UFO sightings and a few reports of alien abductions. It raised eyebrows that 2 F-94 jets were dispatched to investigate the objects that radar operators at National saw fly past the Capitol and the White House. The strange objects that the jets saw on their radar would just disappear when they were within range of the jets. The disappearance, which was held, came in at number 6. This narrative will take us back to the mysterious events surrounding Australian pilot Frederick Valencich's disappearance. Frederick participated in a training flight on October 21, 1978, while the flight was in progress. In order to let Melbourne Air Traffic Control know he was being supported by an aircraft, Frederick radioed the city when he was asked what kind of aircraft it was by Air Traffic Control in an attempt to elicit more information from him. The gearbox was cut off by a mechanical scraping sound as soon as Frederick declared that it was not precisely an aircraft. Frederick's plane lost all contact with the control tower. We have the Shag Harbor event at number 5. A mysterious item crashed into the water on October 4, 1967, close to Shag Harbor, a tiny town in Nova Scotia. At least 11 people who saw this event were present. Even with the Canadian Air Force involved, investigations were conducted, but nothing was ever discovered, and all private and commercial vehicles were said to be entirely accounted for. The Valençol event comes in at number 4 on our list. This incident took place in France. The UFO was seen by a farmer named Maurice Mass in France. He saw something fall from the sky and land in his lavender field, about 200 feet away from where he stood. Maurice approached the airplane that he thought the pilot should be reprimanded for, but soon realized that no helicopter had actually landed in his field. When he looked closely, he discovered an oval-shaped building standing on 4 legs. As if that were not ominous enough, 2 figures around 4 feet tall stood in front of the odd-looking airplane. Maurice explained that the language the 2 entities were using to communicate sounded like grumbling, and he was unable to understand it. He described these beings briefly, adding that one of them pulled out something that curiously resembled a pencil and aimed it at him. He said that it appeared as though his entire being had become immobile. The monsters knocked Morris unconscious before boarding their flying saucer and escaping Morris's lavender farm. After being frozen for 20 minutes, Morris felt his body defrost and regain movement. We have finally arrived at the top 3, with Project Blue Book securing the 3rd slot. Lieutenant Colonel Richard French was once assigned to Project Blue Book, the name given to a study of UFOs carried out by the United States Air Force. Despite the fact that his job was to investigate and essentially disprove UFO rumors and conspiracy theories, Lieutenant Colonel French went before Congress to share his stand-up and give his account of a personal experience of a UFO sighting he had never really been able to explain away. Through the years, he had carried the memory of the occasion. This is the narrative. When he arrived at the location in 1952, while in Newfoundland investigating allegations of a UFO that had crashed across the shoreline of St. John's, there were about 100 people standing by the shore, staring out into the water. When he turned to meet their eyes, he received the biggest shock of his life. He noted that the water was crystal clear and had 2 round vessels, each measuring about 18 feet in diameter, could be seen just beneath. He related that the crafts belonged to 2 beings. He asserted that he had observed them working on the ship up until one of them rose out of the sea and vanished. On the list of top-secret UFO sightings, the Air Force disappearance, which took place on a military base, comes in at number 2. On November 23, 1953, the United States Air Defense Command observed a blip on their radar that should not have been there, close to the Canadian-US border. This indicated that there was an item that appeared to be unidentified in restricted airspace over Lake Superior. An F-89C Scorpion was dispatched to look at this oddity. 2 crew members were aboard the aircraft, but once they were in the air, they had trouble keeping track of the object because its direction was continuously shifting. The unexplained object was chased by the Scorpion jet for nearly 30 minutes as it approached at 500 miles an hour. Suddenly, the 2 blips on the radar, one representing the UFO and the other the Scorpion jet sent to examine the UFO, converged into one. At that point, the oddest thing happened. Suddenly, the Scorpion F-89C disappeared from ground control's radar. A second later, the unidentified flying object made a U-turn and disappeared into thin air. The first and second lieutenants piloting the F-89C Scorpion jet vanished with their aircraft and were never seen or heard from again. Project Grudge Report 13 Saga is ranked number 1. Drumroll please. One of the most spooky reports of extraterrestrial and UFO sightings is the Project Grudge Report 13, without a doubt. The story begins in March 1996 when Sergeant Jonathan P. Lovett was assisting Major William Cunningham at the White Sands Missile Testing Facility in New Mexico, close to Holloman Air Force Base. Major Cunningham heard a piercing scream while they were hunting for debris from a previous rocket launch test. First impression, Sergeant Lovett had been bitten by a poisonous snake, thought Major Cunningham. To insist Sergeant Lovett, Major Cunningham abandoned his quest. When the Major arrived on the scene, Sergeant Lovett was being pulled somewhere by long serpentine arms. Sergeant Lovett was being dragged by the serpentine arms toward a disc-like object that was hovering in the air, about 15 feet distance from where William was standing. Major Williams watched in terror as the serpentine arms dragged his partner to the hovering craft and took off into the air while he stood frozen and mute. Major Williams was finally able to gather his composure and radio for assistance, at which point he was quickly transferred to the hospital for treatment and observation. Where Sergeant Lovett had been hauled away was where his body was discovered 3 days later. The body had been severely damaged, so the autopsy on it produced more questions than it did answers. As anticipated, a probe was carried out to determine the cause of the issue. This probe was reported to have been described in a 600-page study known as Project Grudge Report 13. The problem, though, is that there is no official information on this report, and the US government has categorically denied that there ever was any such report. Have you ever had any unusual sightings? How did it feel for you? I appreciate you seeing this video. Please click the video on your screen to view more mind-blowing videos like this one while you are still here.